Hi friends, today we're going to talk about something that is both being discussed more than ever and not nearly enough, the climate crisis. For most of us, that conversation has moved from whether or not it's happening to what the hell should we do about it. Some people think we need a bold new vision for society. Others think we should attack anyone who tells us to listen to science. Now, here in Vermont, we generally consider ourselves a forward-thinking state, so it should come as no surprise that we have already pledged to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions more than a decade ago. The year was 2007, and Vermont lawmakers were all like, yo, climate change is real, we got to do something about these emissions. And then Sutherland was like, yo, look at this, back in 1990, we were emitting way less, why don't we just do that again? And Sutherland was like, why stop there? Let's cut that number in half, hell. Probably only take us like 20 years or something, and boom, just like that, a law was born. So how are we doing with that? Let's take a look at this handy-dandy graph the state provided us. Here's where we were in 2007, here's where we want to be. Okay, nice, wait, no. So just to summarize, Vermont pledged to reduce its emissions and then increased them instead. How does that happen? Well, while lawmakers were busy regulating utility companies, emissions from transportation and heating soared. So remember, this was back in 2007. How could they have possibly known that the Vermonters of the future would be driving cars and heating their homes? Things are looking a little bit more promising at the local level, at least here in Burlington, where city officials recently unveiled a plan to wean the city off of fossil fuels entirely. Damn, that's ambitious. How's it gonna work? Well, the city already gets all of its electricity from renewable sources, so the plan is to electrify everything. Well, almost everything. Here's where it gets a little hairy. Part of that electricity comes from the McNeil plant, which burns biomass, in this case wood chips, to generate electricity. The problem is, burning biomass often generates more emissions than burning fossil fuels. Not to mention, it requires that you cut down a shit ton of trees, which just so happen to be really good at sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere right up until you cut them down. So just because you can always plant more trees doesn't mean that this is carbon neutral. More importantly, the goal isn't even to level off our emissions, it is to reduce them drastically. Regardless of any shortcomings, Burlington now has something the state does not, an actual plan, which is huge because it helps us start to grapple with how complex this challenge is. I mean, the fact that our emissions are now higher than they were when we pledged to start reducing them is a pretty clear indicator that we haven't quite wrapped our heads around this one. And yes, of course, this is a global issue and tiny little Vermont is not going to save the world, but we still all have to do our part. And that includes car-owning Vermonters such as myself. Transportation has become the single largest contributor to our state's emissions. So while we're waiting for our state leaders to do stuff, anything we can do to drive less is gonna help. And not to mention, it will help you save money on gas. So if not for the planet, do it because you don't want to keep giving money to people like this. Well, that's all I have for you this time. Please like, share. I mean, honestly, who cares? The planet is literally on fire right now. I'll see you next time.